Good morning. Morning, everybody. Wow, that's some cat. Good morning,
Morning.
everyone. We'll take a couple minutes to let everybody in. How are you guys? All right? Awake? Still a few more people coming in. Looks like just about everybody. Just make sure. Good morning, everyone. Everybody looks exhausted.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for asking. You know, the middle of the semester is a bit of a trial from an energy level, standpoint. So I'm not really surprised to see how everybody looks. Especially you guys, because you're generally kind of frankly, a lively group comparatively. But everybody's like, yeah, right, lively. Yeah, that's me. So let me tell you where we're going to go. I'm going to look at the handout together in a moment, as I like to do, because it's one way for me to make sure that I'm also, you know, on the ball. Give me a second here. I do want to take a quick check. I try to look at the chats just to see. Adi, where are you that it's 6 a.m. where you are?
I'm in California.
Oh, really? Wow. It's funny. I'm still getting used to that. It really, when COVID started, I had some students had to go way home. As you know, we have a very international school. So we had people, going to Asia, and their schedules were literally 12 hours different. You know, it was just wild. I had some students in quarantine who were like alone in a hotel for a couple of weeks on the opposite of the world schedule, and the whole thing was rather dramatic and strange. But we're creative, so we do what it takes to move forward, don't we? I mean, that's the way it goes. Listen, I think everybody's here, um, and I am going to ask you, if you're in a noisy room, people are passing through, turn your mic off um, yourself. But other than that, you could leave it on if you're in a quiet place. Turn it on as need be. We don't always have to raise hands in a class like this. You could often just shout out a comment. As you know, I prefer the cameras on. I know a few of you have warned me a couple of times that you're having camera issues that will not affect your grade at all. But if your camera is working, please join the class, because um, that's the best way to truly join it. I want to tell you a couple things, but as I said, I like doing that with the screen sharing on. So let me go right there. I want to go to the handout first. Um, So I want to point out a couple things. Recently I've been giving you these assets in the form of a .zip compressed file with parts that we need to explore during class, like the seashells and that kind of thing. Today there are no assets, so I just want to mention that in case anybody was looking for them. I also want to remind people that there's a revisions folder in our main Google Drive. So basically, in the same drive that we'll be using today, there's a revisions folder, and that's for anybody who wanted to upgrade their project 1. And soon I'm going to offer the same thing for project 2. The main rules when it comes to revisions is the original had to be given in on time, which I'm very picky about. And regardless of what the grade was, if you got something in on time and later on you want to upgrade, do a better version, all you have to do is use the original name, like this, for example. But you'll notice I've added this V2. So .ai is Adobe Illustrator. So just before it, that just means version 2. You pop it in the revisions folder. I want to say something quickly about homework and grades. So yesterday I graded everything that I had received in a timely way. But off the top of my head, I can't tell you whether I made it into the revisions folder or not. So if you gave me a revision and you have any doubt that the revision's been graded, just give me like another week because I'm going to revisit it. It's just there was a lot of homework yesterday. I think I did, but off the top of my head, I don't recall. I will take your revisions very seriously. I promise there might be a small delay. I just want to quickly mention about the YouTube playlist. When you come to class, you don't really need the YouTube videos a hell of a lot. It's only if you get really sick or something like that. Or if you're noticed, oh, gee, the last hour was kind of intense. So I'll go to YouTube, I'll find that class, and I'll just watch the last hour. So I do want to remind you that all the classes this have been posted. It doesn't mention class 6 here, so I got to check my own notes. Did I neglect class 6? I'll take a quick look. But I just want to mention to you, though, that if you see two that say class 6, that means one of them's for your section and one's for the other. Just pick the one that's for section 103. If you only see one video for a given class, it means the material was the same. And just watch that one. I'm going to move forward kind of quickly, but does anybody have any questions about any of the above? I know that stuff is sort of repeat kind of stuff.
Yeah, I have a
Everybody's
question.
all right? Okay.
I emailed you yesterday because you emailed me that my project 1 was missing, but I turned that one in on time. I just
I
wanted to
kind
know
of
if you got that
remember
email.
that, so I'm definitely not going to mark you late, right? So you it disappeared somehow. That happens. It could have been accidentally deleted.
Mm.
So you popped it in the main folder?
I popped it in the late folder just in case, so I didn't get like mixed up.
Gotcha. And I did get your email. It won't be marked late, but that was a smart way to handle it. You're good.
Thank you.
You're good. So I do want to say, though, that the grades are on Blackboard. And, Carly, that means your grade's probably not in there. So as I said, I'll get to it. I apologize. I'll make sure to do that. But I just want to say in general, grades were very, very high. So really, if you got anything under a 90, you have to realize that not that 80 is bad or 85 is bad, but it's not really competitive in this particular environment, which is kind of an upscale art school. So if your grade's over 90, you should feel like pretty good about it. If you got 100, it basically means I'm telling you either of these two things. If you got 100, I'm either saying your work already looks professional, at least that one piece, so I gave you 100, or even if it's not quite professional just yet, there's something very special. So if you got like 97, 98, it means you're like just teetering on some kind of perfect score. Maybe there's, it's a very competitive school. I don't want to fool people and say, oh, gee, they only get 97. Let me round it up. It's not going to give you a truly accurate presentation. So when you have time, go check out Blackboard, see how you did. If the grade's unsatisfying, you have any questions, you could email me. You may know why the grade was low and just choose to redo it. Just drop that in the revisions folder. Okay? Any questions about project 1 or revisions or to say the average grade was extraordinarily high, and it's not because I was in a generous mood. They were just good. They were particularly good. All right. So I'm imagining that everybody's already put the final version of project 2 into the Google Drive. And sure enough, I did peek this morning, so I got to look. If anybody put anything in just now, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Just means I haven't seen it yet. I do want to mention in general, though, always make sure you have a safe copy of every homework you do. Again, like happened to Carly, it might magically disappear, or you may need to show it to someone else for a different purpose. It's high-level work. You're building a portfolio. So be sure you keep safe copies somewhere of your own. So we're going to take a look in about a moment, and I'm going to be addressing these kinds of questions, just like I did last time we did this for Project 1. Does the page have impact? I can't really be any clearer about this. One thing that I have to say to young art students in school is when you get an assignment from a class, and here's the list of requirements, meeting those requirements is just the starting line. It's always the starting line. Impact is what we're after. We're a bunch of creatives. Whatever it is you design, you want it to have impact. Frankly, even if you were drawing a manual for some kind of like blender, a company selling a blender and they need you to do the drawings for the manual. You want them to be beautiful. You want them to elevate the respect for that company, the respect for that product, and ultimately the respect for you as the artist. So impact has to come first. Once there's impact, you have the chance to communicate. But if there is no impact, your words are not met, your images are not heard or seen, I should say, right? But impact has to come first, just to stop someone in their tracks. You don't want people, yeah, yeah, you have impact. You're like, what? So the images have to have impact. Do the pictograms work? That means, do your drawings actually, as separate elements, work? You created a language for this particular project, and each image had to communicate separately as well as together. So do they work? So if there's impact, I get to see if they communicate. And on the way to seeing if they communicate, the separate elements have to do their work. In a sense, you've almost made sentences out of images. And last but not least, and this is something that I apply to every project, is does the design, the whole page, add to the experience or not? The whole page ultimately is what your audience is going to perceive. All right, I'm going to jump right in. But before I do, are there any last minute questions about anything before we just dive into critique? No. So listen, I just want to say something in general about critique. For one, you can have the same piece reviewed by two teachers, and one is going to say, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And the other one's going to say, I don't know, right? Because art really does involve a hell of a lot of taste, right? And one thing that students sometimes do, and professionals, a student sometimes wants to see what is the teacher like? And professionals, what does the client like? But ultimately, I don't really have any stylistic pattern whatsoever. So you're kind of free in that way. I love cartoons, I love painting, I love detailed artwork, I love minimalist artwork. There's no pattern to it. So when I give a critique, I'm talking about things that are consistently true across stylistic barriers. What are the rules? If I was a cave person and I was looking at the artwork on the cave wall, I would be applying the same things to if I'm looking at an orange juice container to see how someone designed the package, right? So take this very seriously. Techniques are going to change. They can change a lot in your lifetime. What tools you use and what they look like as the years pass, but the concepts are ancient. Let's have a look. So I've already opened it. So I'm coming over here to our Google Drive, and I'm just going to refresh it in case there's any last minute additions. Notice I've got folders up here. Here's the revisions folder, and here's the late folder. Right now, I'm going to ask you not to use Project 2 drafts or Project 1 final, right? Because I'm not going to look at them ever again, right? So the only way for me to look at anything is going to be either in the late folder or revisions folder. These here are going to be moved into a Project 2 final folder. All right, let's take a look. Let me just zoom in a little bit, make sure this work gets the respect it deserves. I got to say, Carly, my first reaction is so positive. It's something so fresh feeling about it. If I remember correctly, I was always a big fan of the way you drew this, is it a margarita? This margarita glass. The glass itself just happens to have a beautiful shape. It's a wonderful sculpture. You can see it when it's upright. It produces these wonderful negative spaces. Look at the space between this glass and this bottle. You really want to see negative spaces as much as you can, because powerful negative spaces are a big plus for design. Look at the glass upside down. It's just kind of fabulous. But, there's something just about the simple choice of color. I want to tell you all something. Sometimes when I'm alone and I'm grading stuff, I think, oh man, all this person needed was a different background color. I think actually one of you actually sent back a copy with a changed background, and the piece just went crazy, right? So it's interesting when you find that just that simple choice can make such a difference. This background color is working great. There's all this pop. The white of the margin creates a lot of air, but she's not limiting it to the margin because there's so much white in the artwork too. So the white of the margin and the space between the frames is contributing to all the white in the objects. It's also worth noticing this one moment here where the object breaks the frames is so refreshing. Carly, this project would have been so much less exciting with this one thing not there. The frames just get merciless sometimes when they're just constantly closed in. On yours, this stayed fresh. The message is clear. I got all the ingredients laid out. I have to say it, I'm very pleased with it. I want to say something about this incredibly daring layout. I really have to think about this one. There's part of me that absolutely loves it, um, Leah. And I want to say also that, Leah, where are you? You just wave at me. There you are. Hi. It's just so nervy. All that empty space. It's just so nervy as an artist. So part of me is like, yeah, yeah. The other part of me is like, oh, I don't know. Did she go too far? You know what I'm saying? It's so much empty space. She took a chance. So I got to say one thing. I'm going to give her a big thumbs up for taking that chance. It was an intelligent chance. And it's really about the way this is displayed. I think if it's on a fairly large poster, that isn't going to be ideal because the person passing by is going to perceive mostly emptiness, you know. On the other hand, if it's on something small, like a spread of a magazine, when you open a magazine or a book, it's called a spread. So if it went right across the spread, it'd be very intimate. The person would be holding it. There wouldn't be distance to exaggerate all the empty space. I think this would work better on more intimate terms, holding it right up close. I have to say, it's incredibly nervy. I love the drawings from the beginning. The drawings were just so elegant early on. It's almost like some kind of unusual brand of calligraphy. It's so musical. So I have to say, I give this one a big thumbs up. It really did shock me. I want to tell you, Leah, one more thing, though. If you were working at an agency, there's a very good chance that the art director is going to say, okay, I see what you're after, but we're going to need to compromise, to make sure that that emptiness doesn't, its selective tastefulness is not outdone by just the sheer, space. You don't want, you want to feel like rich space, not an abyss. So I have to say, a lot of art directors would probably say this. They'd say, you know what? Give me this row just like it is, raise it up just a tad, just a little bit, and take this and make it much larger. Because it's such a strong shape that if it was like twice the size or 50% larger, I think it would make a really strong impact, and it would make all this make sense. And it would kind of be like the starring role of the finished product, which you like. You put these fancy stars and things around it, really make it. I think this could be a bold statement, larger. You're going to get a very high grade, right? I have to say, if you were working for me, I would probably ask you to do that so I could compare them before we actually went to press. Nervy, beautiful, big thumbs up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very unusual. So sorry, I have to keep moving things around a little bit here. Let me make this larger too. There you go, not that large. This one picked up a lot. I liked a lot about it. I like this artist's work in general. Something bold and very sure of itself. It's got an interesting feel, which is a combination of, very modern professional graphic design mixed with cartooning. So it's a very kind of interesting kind of balance between two kind of very strong impulses. And I had criticized it earlier, saying as much as I liked a lot about it, the drawings seemed too similar, and it wasn't really clear what the difference is in the hair care routine. I think it's much improved now. I love the way she's treating these greens, to keep them quiet. It's just sort of looks like one green really at different tones. So here subtly it says shampoo. That we were able to tell, but she kept consistent, just a little title for each one. Condition. And again, I'd made this argument about not leaning on the text too much, just leaning on it, in a tasteful, minimalist way. And I think Carly achieved that, because there's no way to know this is conditioner. It would look very much the same unless it had said condition. But I do like the addition of these globular shapes and how she's treating the hair. Detangle is kind of well described. Then it's showing us the different hair products that come in next. I love that they're in silhouette with beautiful negative space inside that circle. Now she's applying the product. This must have been tough to get the difference between detangle and applying the product, but I think it works pretty well. And then at the end, diffuse, separate out the hair. I love the way the the hair pick looks on this page, because it's so dark. It's the darkest element on the page. It's kind of like a big exclamation point at the end, you know. But more than that, it points back in rather than off the page, so it helps me stay inside. Really nice design. Really confident.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done. To say these are fresh. I'm very excited about these. So, you know, this artist I had asked to, you know, give me some more detail, because it was, you know, really kind of too simple last week. And it's interesting, you know, what the artist came up with, Christine. You know, I have to say, I think it's just so much better. It's a sort of a playful idea, having a taped page beside an official looking easel. It's also kind of interesting that you kind of committed yourself to a kind of childlike look, you know, and I want to say something, you know, childlike is in no way an insult. I mean, Pablo Picasso was, you know, probably the most influential artist in the modern world by a long shot. I can't think of anybody who compares to the influence Picasso had. And he was often told at different periods of his work that they had a childlike quality. My family's passing through. Feel free. But I just want to say a couple of things about artists with childlike quality. Can you guys give me a minute? I want to show you something. Right. So we're going to come right back to your work, Christine. I just want to mention something to you. You know, most of us know what the Peanuts comics look like, right? And, you know, when you ask yourself, like, how did it ever get that huge? You know, by the way, I want to tell you something. When I was a young person, very young, I was a cartoonist, but very serious. So I actually went to the companies that hire cartoonists most. You know, they're called cartoon syndicates. And the two biggest ones are in New York. We have King Features Syndicate and forgot the other one. So anyway, as a young kid, I'd just show up and I'd knock on the door with my portfolio. I'm talking 11 or 12 years old. And they were incredibly sweet to me. Sometimes the president would talk to me. But on one occasion, the secretary thought me and my friend were the cutest little cartoonists at the age of 12. And the president agreed to talk to us. And she said, listen, she looked at the work and said, look, I want you to come back in a year or two. You're not cooked yet, but you're on the way. And then she made me make a promise. She said, when you're ready, come to me first, right? And show me the work again, not the other syndicates. And then she proceeded to tell me why. Charles Schulz had come to her office when his work was not ready, the person who invented Charlie Brown. And the work was not cooked, and it didn't look very good. It really didn't. I've seen those drawings. So she turned him down. For whatever reason, he went to the next syndicate, who saw where it might go and hired him as premature as it might have seemed, and went on to make, what, a few $1 billion? So, you know, it's interesting. What happened between the early Charlie Brown and the late Charlie Brown? I want to say a couple things that I would like you to consider. For one, cartoonists take their line very seriously. You know, Charlie Brown and many cartoonists lean very hard on a black stroke. But the line wavers. It's not a constant line. Now, we have not talked about that at all yet. Something coming up in this class. How do you use Illustrator to make lines that are not always the same, you know, even line? The other thing I want to point out is in whole frames, the design is always perfect. You never like, oh, gee, you know, Sally shouldn't be touching this other figure. The space between them is always perfect. The way they overlap is always perfect. The negative spaces are always perfect. So ultimately speaking, we don't usually talk about cartoonists as graphic designers. But just look how perfect the negative space is and the distribution of shapes. And when things zoom in and zoom back out, they're all graphic design decisions. All right. So I like this a lot. I think it's playful. I think the one thing that might make it better would be a little bit more adventure with the strokes, since the strokes are so important. They're very even on this page. But I have to say, I like the whole idea. Just real quickly, I don't want to spend, I've got about 4 minutes for each person, really. Here, she's showing how you mix the sky blue, and then later on, how you mix the green. So there's a little example of color theory going on here. Here it looks like the artist is mixing the colors for the house. And we kind of, work our way through it. Here comes the sun. This is kind of an interesting, just an interesting idea as it works through. And here's the finished product. I think it's fresh. It's original. Christine, I do think that there are ways probably to get more impact out of it. Like I said, maybe work more with the strokes or consider different colors for the background perhaps, because I do think it could be a little bit more, hey, look at me. But I like it overall. It's solid, it's confident, and it's kind of a fresh, plan, fresh strategy. Move stuff around a little bit. I think this is kind of killer. I liked it all along, and I just think whatever changes happened, it made it even better. I sometimes, the final is just so strong, I kind of just forget what I saw earlier. But I do remember saying at an earlier date that the bottom row was sort of the best part of it, and that the top row should learn from the bottom row, and which I think it did. So just bear with me for a moment. The thing about the bottom row, it's very much a graphic designer's form of illustration. Very graphical shapes, graphical decisions. For example, extremely strong verticals and horizontals. The ice cream sticks, of course, extremely strong verticals. And it's worth noticing that repeats the verticals of the margin, the verticals between each column. So there's a real strong up and down kind of rhythm going across the page, but also the very strong horizontal of the ice cube tray, which almost directly imitates the squares of the entire page. The little squares where the ice cubes go. It's kind of a brilliant moment. Very much a cartoonist way of thinking about frames. And then you come here, you got this incredibly bold, utterly simple refrigerator. It really couldn't be a better drawing, as empty as it is. And the whiteness just opens up to the page. I love how wide it is. The way it just owns this. And I remember now, it wasn't quite centered. It's centered now, made the page even stronger. So here the pops again produce strong verticals, but they've got curves that echo the curved refrigerator. And the artist made this choice that this one frame has an additional background element, this oval around the pops. And I have to agree, I'm not sure I would have thought of it, but now that I see it, I think it just looks great, that oval. But if you look at the top row, the things that make it work is these shapes are not crowded, right? Some of you design shapes overlapping, which works very well too, but always, whether they overlap or not, the sense of space and where there's condensed material, lots of objects, and where there's emptiness has to be worked out. So now there's kind of this comfortable air going on around these objects, and it feels just right. I don't really want to move any of these. Here they get a little closer to the middle as they're all, contributing to the ingredients in the blender. Again, nicely placed, beautiful negative space around it, nice sense of balance. I love this kind of quiet frame here. Very strong horizontal with a strong vertical next to it. That's sort of like a wall, so you don't leave. And the purple background just works really well. I don't even have the desire to see a different one. So now, where are you? You there? There you are. So I just want to say to everybody in here, sometimes the tweaks in the last week are just moving stuff, making something bigger, making it smaller, moving them apart, but it makes all the difference. A friend and I use this term, shrink wrapped. Well, we said, hey, is it shrink wrapped yet? When you buy a product and it's just wrapped in plastic and like, it's always been that way. This perfect object, and you tear off the wrapper. Leeward, do you have something you wanted to say? No? No. But this has that sense of, I can't budge anything. So folks, listen, I do want to mention something. It is really hard to listen to a long critique. It really is. And yet, it's the most important part of art school. So I mean, if you're tired, I totally respect that. I really do. But you have to do whatever you can to be absorbent as possible and keep a very open mind. Art is just so subtle. It's just so subtle. When you take a drawing class and your teacher comes over in the physical world and makes one line to fix something and you're like, whoa, that person's been doing it for decades. Of course, they've been considering and looking and thinking for decades. It's compounded subtlety that results in something not subtle, true impact. Anyway, really nicely done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You know what I like about these is just like they're all so different from each other. Everybody found their own way. This one is just so much about the feel of the drawings, this old feeling pen and ink kind of vibe. It's got a very long history, and I kind of like that. In this case, it's got one, openly Illustrator element, this blended gradient behind it with this blush kind of color. I remember talking to the artist about possibly expanding the record in the middle to make it stand out so that all 6 shapes don't feel precisely the same size. And I think that worked pretty well. I think this is, for one, it's a big oval, and it is very central, at least in the center column. So it makes it a strong graphic element, a square, in perspective, I'll admit, which makes it look more like a diamond. And an oval beside each other, kind of large, really makes a point. This artist chose to have no frames at all, let the kind of crosshatch drawing stand out without competing with frames around each element. And I think that works really well. I do like the choice of white for the arrows and the musical notes, because again, it brings more air into the page. This person really has their own voice. It's worked really well. Robin, as I think I mentioned to you before, Robin, can you help me find you?
Hi.
Hi. What I enjoy about this is you wisely closed shapes so that you could fill the record player, for example, with these gradients that you have. And then on top of it, you draw lines that are much more traditional. So you have this combination of understanding the value of closed shapes. See, if you didn't have any closed shapes, I would have complained a lot, because it means you really wouldn't be able to move forward with the way Illustrator thinks. But the whole idea that you didn't limit yourself to them, you drew this other stuff on top, it made it very fresh. So I have to say, well done.
Thank you.
And it's clear what's going on, how you play a record. I want to say a couple things about this one. The black page with the white lines is very strong. That element is a really strong graphic element, white line drawing, essentially. There's also a couple of frames that are particularly outstanding. This one here with the one white arm must be one of the people getting divorced, shaking the hand of the lawyer. The white lapel is rather strange. Why just one part of the lawyer's outfit would be white? So again, if we were going to publish, Anna, I'd ask you to just reduce this part to line drawing 2. It should all be about the hand. This person is seeking help. They're in the middle of something that's usually very dramatic. I want to point out what I like best. So love the white line idea on the black page. I love this particular frame other than the white lapel, just because it's got beautiful negative space again, really strong shapes, very confident drawing. I don't have any questions to ask. This is one reason why I don't like that there. It gets too much attention. My other favorite frame is this one, the 2 couples sadly back to back. Even the line of the floor is broken. Maybe those are just shadows. But I love that idea that they're that separated. It's almost, again, like an abyss they could fall in. I like that they're small like that, too. So it's extra lonely with this big black space. Gee, I hope Anna and I are not depressing anyone.
I did it because I was curious about divorce. I don't know. It came up and I was like, okay, let me see what I can do with this, because I was actually curious about the process.
Got it. And I hope you're not married at your young age.
Oh no.
I'm not really asking, because I'm not allowed to ask stuff like that.
Yeah.
But listen, I want to say something to you quickly just about the topic and what you're dealing with. And one I want to say to you is, when I was a new web designer, one of my first clients was a divorce attorney. And the weirdest part of it was I just got married. Just got married. By the way, I've been married like near 25 years or more. I have to do the math. Very long time. But I have to say, at first, I was like, gee, I don't want to do a divorce attorney. So I had to figure out, like, what would someone dealing with that want from the graphics, from the website? They'd want some security in this process as they're dealing with something difficult. So I see the challenge, and by the way, I just want to add one more thing. I think it's less than 50% of the marriages on planet Earth last. And if you look by country, it's just staggering how low it is in some countries where the majority of people split up. So take your time, folks. Marriage is great. I'm staying married, right? So I give it a big thumbs up. I mean, I don't even think my wife is listening, though she's up there. But wait. Anyway, like it. So, but and I do have to tell you what I don't like, right? Is I love this, but I have to say, like, you have some very abstract tendencies. And as an abstract artist, because that's my other life, which you could always see on Instagram if you're curious, I love your abstract moments, you know. But at the same time, like if they distract from a project like this, you have to back up a little bit. This project was all about creating a process, showing a process that I could understand. So there's a couple things, like just showing me the woman is a little confusing in the first frame. Also, the way she's drawn is rather abstract. Hang on a second there. And I have nothing against abstraction. It's just when you use it. You know, these separate, filled colors are just turning it into a different kind of art for a different kind of assignment. You know, similarly here, I see the broken heart. After a while, I saw that there was an eye there. I really don't know what all the other abstract elements are. So one thing I have to say to you is, make time for your abstract tendencies. They're very important. But when it's a communication design project, make sure that your abstraction never interferes with your communication. These are really kind of too far out really to help. I have to say one more thing to you. This doesn't work at all, really. Just repeating the word divorce over and over again isn't really a solution. This is what I want to say to you, just to be very frank. You have great qualities in here, so I know what you can do. I could see it, right? But I have to say, it's very uneven. So I think you're going to have to like sort out the sides of yourself as an artist. I want to say that's so true of art school almost all the time. I myself, it took me 2 years of art school just to see the difference of when I'm making art just to scratch my own itches, as well as I'm making art for a project, for an assignment, for a client. It took me a couple of years to actually see that. I don't think it's going to take you very long, frankly, but I would learn from the best frames. And if you do want to give me an upgrade, I would welcome it.
Okay, cool.
Okay. It's interesting because, all of us in this room, we probably together love so many different kinds of art. It would be so interesting if we ever had that kind of time where everybody could just say, oh, here's 3 artists I love, and we'd have no limit. It could be filmmakers, animators, sculptors, photographers, performance artists. It would be so fascinating to see, what the 75 examples we choose as a group would be. But it's interesting when you're a commercial artist, it's always about really understanding the project you're being paid for. And in college, unless you're going to fine art program, it's a different story in many ways. But in most of college, it's about treating the teacher like a client. You're already working there. You're getting a taste of this particular, field. All right. Oops. Sorry, I lost one. Give me 1 second there. I think I just need to do something quick that I should have been doing all along. Actually, I'm going to come back to this. I got a little lost. Give me 1 minute. There we go. So, this is very tasteful, very, very clear. We know exactly what's going on. You got to love the color. Really, it's just screamingly lemonade. I love this odd, wonderful little corner ornaments of the lemon slices in the corner. I'm not sure I would have had that horizontal line go all the way to the edge, because I think the air would have been better for you, and that line's not really saying anything. I probably would have taken that out. But I love the way you treated the line inside. We get to see the line of the table through primarily glass and plastic clear objects. The line moves down here. It's just kind of featuring more objects, so that little line in the background is less critical. But I do love the way it just floats in space. So she's got just, mostly kind of driven by the background color, one lighter color and black. So there's this, 3-color palette, and one of them's black, and it's just very, very selective. I see the elements, I see what's going on. I like the distribution of space. I like that this one kind of mounts a little bit, and the lemon's just a bit higher, and then these things are just a bit higher. So there's a slight diagonal going on along the top. I love how this one doesn't even have the line. You know, so suddenly there's all this air here, which works surprisingly well. I have to say, it's quiet and very sure of itself. You know, there's a lot to be said for that simple clarity. It's just got what it needs. I could easily see. It also, by the way, it has this Americana vibe. I could really see a lemonade company. I mean, really, what country is the most lemonade country? You know, this kind of sweeter side of America, this sweeter image of the US. You know, lemonade and barbecues and that kind of thing. Really nice. I want to say this one also is gotten quite a bit stronger. Let me back up a little bit. I believe at some point there was, you know, just mostly nose is the way that I'm remembering it. But right now, somehow it's gotten quite a bit bolder. Let me back up a bit. The objects here are laid out apart from each other graphically. They're not sitting on a table like a still life. She chose to kind of lay them out, which kind of gave them a graphic opportunity because she could have moved them wherever she wanted. But right now, there's just the right amount of space around them. We move over here, and one thing that's interesting about the whole page is there's at least three, actually, now that I look at it, more really strong diagonals. Check this out. This here, which, you know, apparently gets poked through the hole in the nose, is a diagonal that's incredibly similar to the diagonal of the nose itself. So in one way, you can see a negative space coming from this nose all the way to this line, this space between them. So I wind up getting stuck in here, and there's a nice flow as it comes down the page. Look at the way these two frames connect, how the light color connects between them. So one thing I'm pointing out is this strong symphony of diagonals. 1, 2, notably with the what do you call that? The Q-tip. Then the same diagonal again. It's worth noticing here that there's an opposite diagonal. But then again and again until we get to the end, the only one that doesn't have a strong diagonal is the conclusion. That wound up working really well, and I think the colors wound up working really well. I want to point out a couple other little subtle things. She chose not to put a stroke around the nose, but to use a line to describe the nostril. Simple choice, but well done. Most of these things are just fills with no stroke, so there's very selective when this artist chose to use the stroke. I also like the front view of the nose quite a bit. So it's fun. Oh, I want to say one last thing to you, Anisha, that I like, and it's really hard to put my finger on what causes this. And I would like you all to hear this. Most often, when I have young artists in a class that are producing art that includes the human figure, right? Most often, it's the figure that's the weakest point. Now, I was talking up Charlie Brown earlier today, and Charlie Brown has a very strong figure. Now, if you have an anatomy teacher or figure drawing class, she's going to be very mad at me for talking up Charlie Brown, because Charlie Brown's head is like 2/3 of his body. And let's face it, you know, if you're walking down the street and Charlie Brown was behind you, you'd turn around and scream and run for your life because he looks like some kind of mutant. But the drawing's perfect. So one thing I could say to you is whether the drawing of your figure works or not is not really about anatomy. You know, by the way, I taught anatomy and I'm still saying this because in the end, it's about if the elements are designed right, they hold the rectangle perfectly. Even if the eye was in the air and the other one was down, you know, it would acquire the force that graphic design gives you. So what I like about Anisha's figure is from a graphic design standpoint, it's solid. Yes, it's simple, right? Reflects a little cartoon, a little graphic design. It's not about realism, but it's just solid. There's nothing in it you could say, oh, this feels like it's in the wrong place. So I have to say, I think that works rather nicely. Anisha, where are you? It helps me get to know people. Is she not here?
I'm here.
You are here. Oh, there you are. In the dark, a little bit. Oh my God, is that you in the illustration?
Yeah.
It is. I just realized that. Okay. Okay. All right. We're looking at Julia's, and Julia, she kind of hit this early. You know what I mean? I I don't remember if I had really much of a critique for her. Maybe I'd some point felt a little unsure of how the numbers were placed. Um, and I don't know if I'm confusing you, Julie, with somebody else. I have to say though, even if that's true, the numbers are just right now. They're small. They add to the flavor because you chose this bitmapped font that looks like this retro computer look of numbers. So I think they work just right. They add to what you're trying to say, but they're not too big. I also like this start button kind of floating there in the middle. It's kind of pointing out that you have to start up the printer. It's kind of like echoing something smaller on the printer. I think that was fun, playful. She did a great job with these icons. This image looked good all along, and it's going to score a high grade. But Julie, so I want you to hear what I'm going to say, with a little bit of sugar, to add to it, because it really could be published the way that it is. But again, if you were going to work for me, you're not my student, but you're working for me, right? And the client was waiting, we'd have to deal with something. If these circles were smaller so that they're all inside, that might or might not work, right? It might have created too much space around them. I might have even been the one to ask you to make them larger, right? So, and yet I'm not 100% sure about them being chopped on the top and being chopped on the bottom. I like it. It is very professional. I'm going to get a top shelf grade. But if we were going to publish it, I'd need for you to do another version where they don't do that. Can I ask you a question? Did I ask you to do that? to cut them off?
No, they were like that.
Got it. So again, it's not like there's anything wrong with doing it. It's just here it gets so much attention. It makes the top row feel like it's being squeezed against the ceiling, and the bottom row feel like it's being pushed against the floor, which you really don't want. You want it all to come together. So I love these. I do feel like they could be scaled down and just distributed so they have the perfect amount of air. One last thing, and again, you might get an A anyway. It's pretty close. The other thing is I'm not really sure that the dark gray background is helping you, because there's so much gray and neutral tones in the art. So I think if the background was a different color, I could probably appreciate what color you have. But now they're sort of being absorbed. So all these blacks and grays are being absorbed into this middle gray. I just have the hunch that a fresh color back here, not one to take over, I'm not talking about lemon yellow or anything, but some kind of fresh color will make these pop even more. It's funny that I like yours so much and yet I have so much advice. You would think when I really love something I'd have nothing to say. I have one more thing to tell you. This laptop probably would have looked better if it overlapped the horizon line. So I know that that's a table, but look how great the printer looks because it's clear about that line. Again, this is making it feel like it's being crushed against that line rather than being in the foreground. So artists typically avoid arrangements like this. They'd either lower it further down so it's not challenged by this hovering line over its head. Photographers look for this too, by the way, right? Or they'd move it higher so it overlaps. So really, really strong design, possible A, but definitely if I was going to print it, I would want you to deal with that space. Yeah, you're having some issues with crowding stuff, particularly ceilings and floors, right? So we want to kind of get a little bit more comfortable in the safe zone. I don't really mean safe zone, but in the sweet spot. So I like this one a lot though. Shows a lot of skill and a lot of insight. I think it's pretty professional work, really. I just got lost for a moment, no big deal. Just want to see where we're at because I'm going to do roughly half the class and we'll take a little breather. It's kind of exceptional, this one here. And I want to ask Andrew a quick question because I got something, small thing on my mind. Andrew, where are you?
I'm
There
in.
you are. Say, Andrew, were there any changes since last week?
Yeah, I just refined some of the lines.
Some of the lines, because I just liked it so much last week, and I know I gave it a very vocal thumbs up, in front of the class last week. So I was kind of wondering, can you point out something you changed, like which frame, or all
I
over?
mean, just like everywhere, some of the lines were like the anchor points were a little sharp, so I just rounded some of them so like on the dog's back they're smoother.
Got it. Got it. So this is pen tool mostly.
Pen.
Pen. So I want to say to everybody here, Andrew's work is like an advertisement for the pen tool a little bit. Like this kind of ultra clean look he gets, could really only be gotten with the pen tool. So we're going to be doing more pen tool together. So even though we talked about this a lot, I just want to repeat a couple themes. Incredibly strong graphical elements. I love the fact that these are on the same diagonal, which is really pretty cool. And I also love the fact that the dog points me over to the next frame. This shape around the bathtub was always kind of beautiful. The bathtub is just placed so right. Again, like my friend and I used to call that shrink wrapped comment I made earlier, it feels so, here I am, just done. Don't budge left, don't budge right. Even subtle things like the color he chose for the water. Here, the dog's pointing back in, so we're not risking leaving the frame visually, which is pretty good. And to double ensure that we stay inside, we got a diagonal from the shower head that takes us way down to the next row. So here again, the dog's pointed right, taking us in. We got a very strong diagonal here, but I'm not really worried about any competition. It's not sending me backwards, right? Especially because we got this cool line from the blow dryer to the hand. And watch how it gets picked up by the bone. It's just like kind of wonderful flow of placement. Obviously, as the artist just said, he's very concerned with smoothness. And I think he just hit his color palette early, communicated clearly. It's really a particularly excellent job, Andrew. Well done.
Thank you.
So, one thing that I just want to say to everybody, and I think we'll take just, let me just think. It's a little early for a break. One thing I'd like to say to everybody is, I really just want you to learn from each other. I'm so pleased that there's no stylistic pattern in here. One thing that does worry me, and I'm not picking on anybody, right? Some of you are really can't keep your attention on anything but your own work, right? And that's scary. I realize this takes a tremendous amount of attention. I also know that some of you have learned to fake attention. I had a guest over who goes to Pratt. So she said, I don't teach at Pratt. So she was able to be really honest. And she said some crazy things over dinner. For one, she said, oh yeah, we learned how to look really attentive in Zoom. That's my attentive look, by the way. And I was like, you're not telling the truth, are you? That you've learned how to fake paying any attention? Oh my God. So anyway, I'm assuming that most of you are with me, right? If you can't keep your attention on this, you're going to have to build your attention level. And I know there's chemical things that come into play sometimes, there've been great artists even with attention deficit, but they have to know, how to work with their own, fuel, how to spend it. Anyway, this one was always beautiful. It really was. And the only argument I had for the artist early was, can we really follow it? And I have to admit, I was a little, mixed feelings because I just liked looking at it so much. I didn't even want to care that the instructions were followed. But here I am, the teacher, and this whole project is extreme communication design. You're really communicating. So I think this artist got to keep everything that was beautiful and make it even clearer. One thing I don't remember seeing before was a key, that the larger dashes mean fold, right? The long lines mean draw. So here's
I added that.
That was just a brilliant addition, I really got to say. And you didn't overuse the text. I said to people, I'm afraid of people, using text to explain everything. To make an omelet, break open an egg. No, just show me the egg. But you used it in a subtle enough way just to help make your point. So I know this is folded. I know this is drawn. I know this is cutting out where the drawing is. So now I could actually follow the entire process. I mean, one thing you had along was a really nice color sense, with kind of symphony in blue and white, very selective blue. You also figured out how to make this texture in the background. And a few of you guys did that. And that's going to help because the next project's going to need it. And I'm going to be teaching everybody how to work with texture. We're going to make time today to talk about the next project, by the way. But you have to say this one's got color. It's got perfect amount of airspace. It's got flow. Look at these killer scissors that repeat over here, right? The numbers are kind of subtle. I have to say, this is just wildly professional piece. And you had great things going and you made it even better. Really well done. So listen, I'm going to confess something to you guys. I hope no one holds this against me. It's less of an obstacle in Zoom than it is in the classroom. I have this tiny disability, it seems, where I don't recognize faces, except after I've seen it at incredible length or remember names. And there's some very famous people with the same affliction. In fact, the most famous psychologist of my generation, Oliver Sacks, couldn't recognize the President of the United States. He couldn't recognize Elvis Presley. He had a terrible case. He hid it from the public his entire career because he was a celebrity. I can recognize people like that. But really, I need to see you for at least a semester before I recognize a face. It's very embarrassing. So here, I really depend on your names showing up. So every now and then I peek. I ask you to wave at me because I'm trying to work on it. Adi, I see you over there. Okay. Really nicely done work. And again, apologies if you ever do bump into me out on the street, once we're free to do that again.
I'll just tell you what my piece looked like.
Exactly. I'll remember the artwork perfectly. Exactly right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you remember someone's like artwork though? Like that's what I'm curious of. Is it just faces?
It's just faces. And so the only solution I have is if I photograph you, if I draw you even better, I will remember you forever. But for some reason, I have almost total recall for artwork, verging on the bizarre. Pieces from childhood, and I've probably seen hundreds of thousands of pieces given the kind of work that I do. So I don't know what it is about faces, really. I love people. But anyway, I don't want to get talking about me. I'm just mentioning it. So why I appreciate Zoom, for one, I'm trying to connect your face to the artwork. That's my new, thing I'm trying to do. But yeah, so it's a little embarrassing sometimes. All right. I want to come back. So what I'm hoping is that you're seeing things that you like in each other's work, and not just whole pieces. I mean, that's great. But, ideas. I'm like, oh, that was clever, or, oh, I wouldn't have done that, this type of thing. So I think this piece got, quite a bit stronger. I'm still a little unsure of this horizontal line in the middle. Is just so thick that it really gets a lot of attention. When you're working with multiple frames, you really want to make sure that you've got a flow. So on the top, it's hard not to have a flow because there's 3 of the exact same pot here, and where the handles are create this diagonal that just keeps going straight across. But then suddenly I have to get over this huge line. So I think these 2 rows could have been brought closer together. I think the palette's working fairly well. I've always liked the fact that one frame is open like that, and the way these curly lines communicate the heat, the steam coming off of the beverage, which I really, really like. But, still, I feel like it needs something more to just come to life. It's close, but I do really feel like it could use more life. I see what you did, letting us know what the elements are, right? Which helps, but I don't know. How would we break this page up? It's a little too expected. I'm wondering if this spoon could be much larger so it could break out of the frame maybe. Maybe a few of these things could break out of the frame. Maybe the container, maybe a lot of these hovering objects could just bust out completely. Because between there being such a dark blockade between everything and everything being blocked in other than this, it's a little restrictive. I think you communicate, the colors are starting to work. I love the coffee cup here. Most of the drawing works pretty well. I still have a hard time with this mesh though. It's the weakest drawing on the page. Something about it being open on top is just weird. I mentioned last time the same. I feel like this still needs a little bit of attention. But I do want to mention something small to you that Yeah, I have to wonder if it would help. So I'm going to download this. And it's like, you know, it's got all the main ingredients, but it's not singing yet. And the one thing that I see in my own work is sometimes I satisfy all the requirements, you know, the main goals, but the magic hasn't come. And I just face that on a gut level. You know, what do I need to do is not always obvious, but she's answered all the big problems. So the idea should be that it should be kind of fun to explore other options at this stage. So I'm trying to select the background. I'm going to take a quick look at her layers and see if anything's locked. And hey, I really appreciate you using layers like that. You know, makes it really helpful. I want to show you guys a couple quick things. I think I'm going to borrow this eyedropper here for a minute and steal this color for a moment. Then I'm going to actually take the strokes out of these boxes. I'm holding down Shift right now so I can get all of the 7 boxes. And I'm bringing the stroke box to the front and clicking Stroke and None. Isn't it fresher? You know, I'm not saying that this is like, you know, mastery at this stage, but I'm trying to bring some freshness into it. It's possible that the strokes on this one are just, you know, not particularly helpful. You know, so I'm kind of wondering what would happen if, would that help in any way? So I'm just taking strokes off. And by the way, I have nothing against strokes. I'm just pointing out that sometimes they just interfere. They're just not. Somebody's mic is on and it's creating a bunch of feedback. This one's giving me a hard time, so I don't think I want to spend too long doing this right now. I'm not getting the pot. All right, I'm gonna drop this right now because I don't want to keep going. I think if these were, it may take a little while, but let me see if I could do this quickly. I'm gonna lock that again. And quickly want to grab, I locked the background so I could grab all this at once. And I'm not saying this is what I would exactly want to do. Oops. So those boxes are back there too. All right, guys, we'll take one moment more. So, I'm not saying that I want all this space, but just look how the flow works now. I've got less strokes to kind of act as barricades. I've got a fresher color in the background so it doesn't feel as sleepy. And I have a little less space keeping them from each other. So, I think a number of these changes could really add a lot. So there's a lot of good stuff here. If you do want to do another version, I would welcome it. You know, whatever it is that you could bring some life, freshness, a little stimulation to add to the requirements, you know, essentially. A lot of potential there. We've only been in class for an hour and a quarter. It's a 3-hour class, so I'm going to stretch out the break for a couple minutes more. You know, this one has such a nearly geometric feel about it. You know, that it's almost defying some of the suggestions I had earlier, but it's defying them very well. You know, it's so methodical. It could have gotten robotic and boring, but it doesn't. You know, even these decorative elements, which I've admired before, that overlap the margin, make a very strong, primarily horizontal movement. Very mechanical though. And then we've got these rectangles, but they're not really frames, which is interesting. It feels like the others, which had a lot of them had rectangular frames, but these are actually the objects. This mat and the seaweed that goes on the mat, and finally the rice. Then it looks like it's turned over, and she actually added flip over to make sure I get it. I think that was a good decision in this case, right? The elements are put on, and she shows us how to roll it up. I think it's really nice. You know, one thing that I think I like also, you know, we may not all agree, you know, it's interesting how subtle the actual sushi is against the background. The kind of textural white of the sushi, um, you know, is very subtle against this background. You know, some people would want to stroke around that or a darker background. I think for me right now, it works. You know, it's kind of fresh and unusual. The whole thing is kind of unusual, which I really like. I have a question for the artist, though. Maya, where are you?
Hi, I'm here.
Are you? Where? Oh, there you are.
Hi.
Something. If someone asked me to draw something that involved a lot of rice, I would shudder a little bit because I wouldn't be sure exactly how to go about it. You know, it sounds like difficult. Um, could you tell us a little bit about how you did the rice starting in that third frame?
So I just made a bunch of little like rices, and then I just copied and pasted it and then grouped it together.
Wow, you
And I
must have been
moved into like
delighted.
what?
You
Sorry.
must have been delighted that it.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I like doing it.
It's very convincing, especially on the sushi also, which is even harder. Very nicely done. Very
Yeah.
nice.
I also have another
Yeah,
question. Do you
yeah,
think I should
please.
should I extend like the actual thing itself so it remains the point 0.5 margin, like on the sides?
Well, you do have the 0.5 margin, right?
Like on the left and right?
On the left and right. The top and bottom is smaller.
Yeah, like should I leave it this way
I'm
or
going to
should
let you slide on it because it's not important enough. I won't take any
okay,
points off. But
okay,
next time, please be sure to honor that margin. As
okay.
you
I
see,
can still do it. Like I can,
it won't change your grade, but if, you know,
okay.
I'll leave it up to you. I just want to say something to everybody quickly, though. You know, if I was going to be uptight and very much first year kind of teacher, I wouldn't let anyone do these overlaps of the margin. I'm playing a kind of a bit of experiment this semester. If this was on a printer that would cut off the margin, you could see Maya's work would still look great. I could easily see those leaves getting cut off. If, on the other hand, it was presented as a JPEG on a website, there's no margin limitation, right? It would look that much better. It works better both ways, which I think is kind of interesting. But yeah, I think in the future, though, you want us to be really uptight about numbers like that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to do one more, I promise. I keep on hinting about a break, and then I'm not taking it. We're going to take a break right after this. So this is another kind of folding, you know, kind of project. And this semester I had a couple of these. I had a few hair care ones between, I got 50 students at FIT this semester. And also works really nicely. There's a few things I want to point out about this. But I think it's the color that comes across first. The first thing you see is just color. This pink, white, blue, right? A very, very limited palette in a very positive way. It's fresh. The artist is using gradients, very subtle gradients to create the paper, which is just beautiful. She could have done it. He could have done it in flat colors, and it might have worked well, but I don't think it would have worked as well as this does. I think this just looks great. I love the whole idea that even the background is treated like it could be cut or folded, which is sort of interesting. We're making a very simple heart, so we could see exactly what that line means, because there's the exact same diagonal when it was folded. So now we double understand what this is trying to say. Really clearly communicated. I know exactly what's going on here. Which is just really well done. Also, I'd like everyone to notice how the artist made use of scale. You know, the sizes are not the same. This is clearly larger than the one in the middle, right? The one in the middle is actually shorter than the one flanking left and flanking right. And of course, most notably, the finished product is largest of all. With these angular folds, it's large, it's impressive, it's a familiar icon, the heart, probably one of the most popular icons ever made. And look at the negative space. Look at this almost lightning bolt space between these two that the blue makes. Artists also found drop shadows on their own. I got to ask Miles a question. And Miles, I might have asked you this before. Where are you? Oh, yeah,
Right here.
there you are, of course.
You see me?
Did you say you had a little bit of Illustrator experience in the past?
Yeah, I do have a little bit.
Right. So, and you know, you're using it well. So I want to point out to everybody, I never stop you from using anything you learned elsewhere. The drop shadows, creating these subtle shadows, really worked in his benefit. It's should be on an agenda coming up pretty soon. Nicely done. So listen, I think what we're going to do is take a small break. It's 10:20. Just give me a minute to get my bearings, let you know what kind of break we can afford today. I'm going to back up for a minute. So it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 more. We're doing good for time. Let's take a 20-minute break. All right, everybody? So listen, come back at 10:40. Don't be late. We're going to dive in, and we also have to talk about the next project and one technique that we're going to do together today. So there's a chunk of stuff left. 10:40 on time. I'll see you then.
Yeah, see you.
See you. Yes. Hello. Do you guys hear me? Good, I guess so.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so if everyone would get their cameras back on as they arrive, let's give everyone a minute just to settle in. We've got, you know, a few more worthy projects to look at, and then a couple other things to cover for the day. All right, we've got about 6 more people, I suppose. Maya, Sanaya, Christine, Carly, Anna, Alik, if your cameras are working, please turn them on. Join us. I'm going to move right ahead. And if any of you haven't already seen your work discussed, I surely don't want you to miss it. And I'd like to know you there. Okay. So, 1 second here just to rearrange things a bit. Oops. One second, I'm getting a, all right, there we go. Okay. This one is just so loaded with charisma, isn't it? I mean, really, you know, I've long been interested in
can't see
relation. What? Oh, you can't? Oh, thanks for telling me. Give me 1 second then. Let's see what's. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great, 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 great. So, you know, I'm very interested in the relationship of cartoons and graphic design. Um, eh, you know, there are so many kinds of illustration that, you know, there was something, there was an artist I meant to mention you last week, and his name just occurs to me now, Paul Rand. So there's a really strong relationship between illustrators and graphic designers always. Earlier today, I talked about Charles Schultz, who did Peanuts, and he's very much a cartoonist, right? But I want to give you a quick peek at somebody before we come back and look at Alessandra's work. Paul Rand is someone really worth your time to get to know. Paul Rand is most famous for logos because he's done just about every famous logo that you've seen. You know, it's incredible. The ABC logo, which is very familiar, Worlington, UPS, IBM. It's like absolutely the king. But that's not really why I like him, as important as that is. It's the way that he sees design and illustration. You know, and you can see it's just a repeat thing where his work is always illustration and design at the same time, graphic design. He's also got a very unusual way of seeing negative space. And frankly, what I love best is not his most famous field at all, it's his children's books. And there's something just so fresh and clean and clear, and he's really amongst the most famous designers ever. So I doubt he saw himself as a cartoonist, and yet there's a strong relationship to cartooning, for example. But there's also a strong relationship to fine art. You could bet he was looking at Matisse, which I'm spelling wrong, but it'll come up anyway. There we go. It was pretty clear to see how the late work of Matisse, a second there, affected the whole career of this guy. Paul Rand. So it's interesting to me, there's always the right amount of space. There's always interesting negative space. Let me see if I could do a quick Paul Rand children's books search. And, they're remarkably simple, but look how strong that is. For anyone who has a cat, they know that cats do that. For example. Oops. Sorry, lost that.
It's cute.
Yeah, thank you. If you're talking about my cat or Paul Rand's, I don't know. But they're just beautiful. And it's when it comes to simplicity and playfulness, he's really the king, is the way that it meets graphic design. Look at that telephone. And just the fresh quality of the page. I'm not trying to push anyone in that direction. I did want to share it, though, with particularly with Alessandra. So, your figure is so confident. Again, I don't know if an anatomy teacher is going to say, this, a little bit strange proportion, but as a cartoon, it's just completely convincing. And a big change of scale. She's further back and in the bed, and now we're much closer to her, so she's a larger figure, really controlling the center of this page by having that large figure there. The clock is serving almost like a little rhythmic addition to the artwork. Look at this massive sized coffee pot that she's holding. It's really playful, pouring it all over the place and into her cup. She's practically hidden by the cereal. Her eyes are slightly closed. And then she takes her blanket, and look at this long horizontal that's letting us, really get the feel for her pulling that blanket off to the side. And then she's in front of the computer, cereal, coffee. Alessandra, I really hope that's, is that Zoom that you're in? Is that you going to class? Yeah, I don't know. But again, this little pink bar at the bottom even makes a lot of sense. I want to ask you a question or two. Alessandra, where are you? Can you wave at me? There you are. There's a subtle grid in the background that I see. This little, so that's intentional, is it?
Yes.
And was that because you felt like the page needed a little bit more visual interest?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of like grids. I think they're really cute. So I just like put it in there.
I have to say, like, again, if we were going to publish this, I'd ask you to give me a version without the grid. Only because I think the piece is incredibly confident on every front. Design, space, the distribution of objects, just the charisma of your drawing. You figured out how to make interesting strokes for all those lines, which, by the way, aren't black, which is also refreshing. They're a dark maroon color. It's all working for you. That, for me, I find the grid kind of distracting because it's, so orderly and organized and, a little uptight and doesn't really say anything about what else is going on. I think the white page is probably all you need, would be my guess. But I have to say, it's top shelf work, really playful, fun, and very mature, all at once.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This one, it's such an unusual only because it's just this extreme of boldness. You know what I mean? It's very, it's kind of nervy. Jackson's piece. It'd be easy for me to say, hey, man, this doesn't represent a lot of work, if I was feeling critical, because, it's super economical. And, if someone's going to go this simple, it looks like it could have been executed in a much shorter amount of time, at least in theory, than the others. It doesn't matter when you score. The question, does this score? Well, if you look at the top row, that top row is practical perfection, if you ask me. Even the toothpaste and the toothbrush make this perfect set of graphic elements. Again, really bold negative space between them, the right amount of air. I've always loved this frame. The super close-up of the brush, how it opens up to the edge. He's saving the strokes just for the drawing, right? There's no stroke on the boxes, for example. And just that green color behind the white boxes, just to kind of bring it all home. This fresh burst of green. Maybe it's mint like the toothpaste. We have the strong diagonal. This stuff's perfect. This row's okay. It's definitely not as exciting as the top row. We could ask why. I don't know. An oval and a rectangle, that can be very strong. So, I do think it's placed well. This here is a beautiful little drawing. I don't know why it's not feeling more interesting in its frame. I wonder whether this drawing should be larger in its frame. Because there's something going on here where this is tall, these two are the same height, and they're also the two smallest objects on the page. So it's a bit of a, you know, for something so strong, it's a bit of a letdown that these are suddenly demoted. They're short. I know this is even shorter, but it's large. So these are not, you know, so, and lastly, this shape here is the only organic shape. And I kind of wonder whether you could have come up with a shape you liked even more. I like it because it does feel like a tooth. But I don't know. I kind of feel like that bottom row just doesn't have the magic of the top row. So I give this a thumbs up. It's going to score a very good grade. But I could imagine it being even better. Jackson, do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Do you have any intuitions about that bottom row? Do you think you got anything up your sleeve that could, just as simple as the top row, but somehow bring in more strength to that row?
Yeah, definitely.
So again, I'm going to invite you if you want to give me that revision. It's going to get a good grade, but I think it could get an excellent grade because all the ingredients are there.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Super duper up here, though. Really nice page. You know, the color is just flat out singing. And I don't really remember these colors from last week, though the drawings feel very familiar to me. I think I have to ask the artist a little bit about it. Minjong, is that, did you change the colors since last week?
Oh, it's the same color.
Is it? Gosh, I don't know why this week it's stirring me. And I just realized something. This is the color of your room. I can't believe it.
It's actually a virtual room because my room right now is so dirty, so I don't want to show up.
Oh, I see. So you chose this perfect room. Like, I always live like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all do that, right? You kind of point and it's like, oh, all the mess is that way. I better sit here. But it's funny how the palette's so similar. So this is a beautifully drawn pot where all the ingredients are going to go in. But notice the shape of the shadows. I think that's kind of brilliant. And I'm admiring it because I wouldn't have thought of it. I'm not, you know, it's really out of the range of how I see, but I think it works so well. So I'm very, very much impressed by it. I also like the very faint stroke she used. She felt the need to have a stroke to help define the pot. Yet this pouch of, I imagine it's the ramen noodles in the front, have a black stroke. So ramen noodles in the front. And it really sets the pot behind it. You know, the bold black strokes of the package in front creates a kind of space. So there's some nice air going on. We move across here. I want to say that the only thing about this one, if again, like I like to say in class, if we were going to go to press, you know, produce 10,000 of these, there's a couple things that I would probably ask to see. I do enjoy these objects overlapping the border. They're overlapping intelligently. But there's something a little strange about it. Like this one feels small. So I don't want you to feel like you have to be literal. Oh, well, if the pot's this big, then the measuring cup must be this size. I'm not sure we have to do that in a project this graphic. I do think this would look great if it was much larger, you know, 50% larger, because right now it feels a little unsure of itself. I feel similarly about a lot of the other small objects that start to feel unsure. The chopsticks over here look utterly sure of themselves, so I know it can be done. And even this, where the cucumber, I believe it is, and the pepper are starting to get larger, I would play a little bit more with scale. Now, I want to say on this one, there's a few issues with scale because there's so much empty space. And again, you know, we saw one today that was half empty space and it kind of worked. So it's hard to say when emptiness really works, but it's a question you really have to ask. Everybody has to ask. You know, when do you need more space? When do you need less? And if there's a lot of space, what really makes it work? You know, we were looking at Paul Rand, and if he ever has a lot of empty space, the shape of the space is always compelling. So you can get, you know, a big white space, but the shape of it is so compelling, you know. So what do you do with it? Like if you had a picture of me right now, right? So here's my head with the archway behind me, right? It's worth noticing that the dome of the archway is the same as the dome of my head. So I've got all this interesting space. That's a negative space going on right here. That kind of works. I'm not saying it wouldn't be better. I'm composing. All right. So anyway, I would reconsider the distribution of this. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful page. But these things are far to the left and these two are far to the right. But why? You know, if they came a little bit closer in, maybe these two could stay here. I don't want them to get crowded. That's not what I'm saying. But there's just so much empty space that it's almost like you're protecting it. Like that's more important. And by the way, you know, you already said that's not your room, but it's worth noticing that that room has a lot of empty space in there. So it could be that some people really want more space. And if you do, just make sure that it's activated somehow, that it's compelling. You know, if you look at the space underneath the chopsticks, it just makes an interesting shape. So there are times when it's interesting, but there are times when it's just like not, you know, all that. So I think this is beautiful. It's going to get a high grade. Whether it'll get an A or not, I'm not sure. But I think with a small bit of rethinking how the space is treated, it's an easy A. It's got a lot of charisma and it's crystal clear. Shows a lot of talent and vision. So, you know, I want to be, you know, fair about grades, especially because FIT students get crazy about grades sometimes. And, you know, who can blame you? But I'm not saying that every project has to be an A. You know, maybe that's a controversial thing to say. I don't know. Oh, we looked at this. Sorry, there, Jackson. I know we were there. You know, but if you've got the energy, you know, if you could reach in a healthy way, you know, especially if illustration is going to be a big part of your future, this just knocks me out. I have to say, I liked a lot about this before, and it's not that I remember exactly what it looked like in the draft, but now it's just utterly singing. For one, the colors are just so unusual. You know, she's got that lavender in the background, openly appealing kind of color, but it's interesting to me that the browns look so beautiful with it. The browns, even the gray countertop, are singing, but something about the way the purple and the blues are treating the other colors that make the whole page sort of sing. It's got a sense of light. It's also worth noticing that the top row here is dropped down, so it seems to have an extra large margin, more than the ½ inch that I needed, but it's accommodating this really large coffee pot and the milk beside it. So one is making a left diagonal, one's making a right diagonal. That's really, really important stuff that keeps the page interesting. It would be so much less interesting if it was locked into these squares. Also notice this, watch the coffee pour from the overly large pot into the blender, come down behind the ice cubes. That motion gets picked up by the syrup, right? And then the syrup comes way down into the bottom row, kind of flows into here. So there's a relationship between the frames. So there's a lot of overlapped elements, which I think are working well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames at least. Colors work well. Everything has the right amount of space around it. It's just, and it communicates. Now I know how to make this delicious looking thing. I kind of studied it this morning because I was like, I think I got to make one of these. Gabriella, where are you? Just trying to get to know faces. There you are, right? Well done. Do you actually make this at home?
Thank you. Yeah, it's like a frappuccino.
Wow, so it's like the breakfast of champions. The frappuccino is the secret. Caffeine is the secret. Caffeine and chocolate, how can you lose? All right, really nicely done. You have to say, these are a great set. Even the ones that I give the most criticism to, it's just, they're all just really strong. They communicate, they're either already completely professional or right on the edge. So here we've got Hair Day. I said last week how much I liked the font that she chose. And we've got some, you know, again, really fun attitudes about color. Notice the color of how the shampoo and the bubbles are handled really nicely against this kind of lavender background. And, you know, she's describing some difficult things really clearly. Obvious shampoo, obvious combing, towel drying, blow drying, an additional kind of hair treatment. I love this pick the accessories thing. I'm not sure that I recognize these. I guess if we were going to publish it, I'd ask you to spend a little bit more time so at least I could tell, you know, clearly that this is a ribbon or, you know, what's scrunchies or whatever they are, but they would need a little bit more work. Then there's this person here ready to go, looking a little bit shocked. but ready to go. Charismatic drawing, well placed. I like how these here are equal size, but on the bottom row, we got to break up the size a little bit, especially with this concluding one. It's a nice, self-confident page.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't have any changes for you to make now, but again, if we were, and you're welcome to move further if you do want to. If we were going to go, I would ask for a stronger shape for the hairdryer. The back might look like your hairdryer or not, but the shape itself is just sort of a little uncertain, and I would definitely want
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very welcome. I really am kind of in love with this one. And Angel, where are you? There you are. Really nice work. And it's interesting the way you submerged everything into that orange space. And I want to point out how she did that. And I don't know if it's Zoom going to my head because I said almost the same to Mingjan, but look at Angel's space that she's in. I know it's not orange, but she's utterly absorbed in the color of that space. It's kind of like the games we were playing with gradients. He's just absorbed in that red. It's interesting that here there's similar things. Look at the way the hand comes from this empty space right around the cat. She didn't close the hand. She didn't draw the body. And yet I completely buy that. I have to say, it's just wonderful use where it goes from a negative space point of view and kind of like merges, flows right into the hand. Look at the cat over here in the lower row. Again, here it's being wrapped up and it's so cozy. She's just completely just enwrapped in those arms. This one's closed and it has a beautiful line with the towel going on. And here it just opens to take us inside. It's beautiful. Look at this hand here. So I have to say, like, the first thing this one communicates with is color. It's got the pale yellow background, the orange inner backgrounds, and pretty much a purple world of objects. And where the orange is a critical part of this. Everything's placed so perfectly. Look at this open cat too. It's like, you can't really fill that. She must have made a shape behind it to fill it. And look at the neatly folded towel. It's just so subtle and clean and clear. Right? It's really kind of exceptional. I told you guys that I can't remember face for a minute. I'm looking for Angel again. Oh, there you are. Well done. Angel, I gotta ask you something. Are you interested in illustration? Do you know what your major is going to be?
I'm going for a major in graphic design.
Graphic design, which is terrific. And I hope as a graphic designer, you include some of your illustration skills like Paul Rand did, who, by the way, got incredibly rich juggling both of those things. I do want to show you something really fast, though, that's in the way of history. There are two artists historically that this project always makes me think of. One of them is Winsor McKay. And I'm not sure, did I show you any Little Nemo in this class? Does that ring a bell at all? Little Nemo in Slumberland?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I did show you that. So I'm going to show you something different then. I want to show you specifically this really old cartoon. It's antique, called Crazy Cat. And it's possible that a couple of you might have seen it, spelt with K's. This was incredibly popular, maybe around the year 1900. It's interesting how influential it is even now. Hard to get you a close up. Let's just see. There we go. If we could do that. They have a really kind of old look, as you could see. Really unusual attitude about empty space, which it's used very well. It's in this really abstract, almost surreal world that's mostly empty. It's a cat, and this mouse is in love with the cat and makes the mistaken way of to show its love by throwing things at it. So it's a little violent, really. But look at the line quality. There's something just so interesting about it. A lot of air moving into the objects. Like, look at the air moving into the tree. It's interesting. I don't have really too much to say about that, other than this is a kind of a perfect project, and some things about it remind me of antique cartooning, so I just wanted to mention it. Really, really well done. So, I want to say something about this one, and I wrote the artist about it. Elsa, did you get my email? Where are you, Elsa?
Yeah.
There you go. You got it for me?
Mm-hmm.
So gotta say, really, really nice project, and I happen to have two artists in the room when she had sent me a copy where the bottom row was in 2 different orders. So you might remember last week we went across the top row, right? And then right underneath this was this. So we read it this way. We came across, down, and then to the left. And, you know, she kind of did it fairly well, but I made the argument that a lot of people are going to get lost because they're used to reading left to right over and over again. So she sent this to me with some doubts, and I had these 2 artists in the room, and I showed them the first copy, and one of them went right to the wrong place and read it out of order. By the way, this is somebody who presses flowers, too. And she read it completely wrong. I was like, oh my God, am I so glad I said that to Elsa. And then I showed her the new one, and she got it completely. And then I showed the other artist without them even talking to each other, and they both said, oh, definitely this one. So big score. It was really worth redoing it. I think it's super professional. This looks like an excellent kids' books on different crafts they can do. Really well done. I really like the way we go from folding the page over the flowers to tucking them in here. You know, it's just really, really clear. Nicely designed. Beautiful color. Almost no strokes on this one because the color's so strong. It's really got a strong sense of light and design. It's really kind of pretty perfect. So again, more hair washing, and this one's got very nervy sense of color. You know, really, it's so dominated by what's often called high key. Photographers use that term more often. High key meaning the photo itself is meant to be rather light, other than the hair. You know, so here her hair is distinctly the darkest thing on the page. I kind of really like that. You know, I would say to Maya though that if we were going to publish it, I might ask for a version while she helps clarify some of the shapes that are so subtle, they're hard to tell apart. So it really depends what we're going to do with them. If they were going to be big posters, I think she'd probably have to clarify it because people would walk right by. They wouldn't see the separate colors so clearly, like this one, you know, so subtle. So I really like the nerve of it, and I love the overall feel. Might need them clarified by maybe making this blue a little darker, or the background I'm talking about, or maybe a faint stroke around the figure. I'm not quite sure, but I really do like the new design. I don't remember it having the large bubble-haired person on the left and the finished person on the right with their hair all done and large, but I really think that works really, really well. So Maya, I would say this, it's really nice work, right? Really nice work, really. But if you were going to take it further, it's a big if, right? I would try to get these a little further from the walls because it's really kind of crowding that wall. This one too, right? So they'd have to move away, which naturally means these 4 would have to be a little smaller, right? Because they're also getting a little crowded in here. So I think if they were a little bit smaller, you could set it up so they have the right amount of air and still letting these 2 come in from the walls because they really are crowding the walls. So I think not only they crowd the walls, but they crowd the inner 4. So I'd move this to the right, this to the left. I'd make all 4 of these a little smaller and see if they need to be budged a little bit. It's about getting just the right amount of airspace, that perfect amount of airspace. I have to say I like this one a lot, you know, but there's always more. Yeah, especially in art school, there's always more to do. Oops. I got lost. There we go. Or was that, did I actually come to the end there? All right, I gotta ask. I have the feeling I skipped somebody. Did I? Did I skip anybody? No? So guys, listen, I want to wrap this project up with a couple of words, and I want to head toward 1 technique, 2 techniques that I want to share with you. We'll join each other. We'll do some Illustrator together. And I want to talk up the project 3. First off, congratulations on making it through to the 50% mark, right? We have hit half the work, right? You guys are an exemplary group, and I'm not kidding you. I'm used to a lot of talent at this school. I don't know if you got some kind of chemistry going or what, but you're particularly elevated. So I'm psyched. The first projects were beautiful even. This one was substantially harder, right? But I think they were also beautiful. remember about revisions, include V2 along with the original name. So if I've already graded at that point, I will look at your V2 and change the grade accordingly if it's superior. There is a revisions folder, and that's the only one you're going to use. So next time you come here, all of these are going to be moved into a folder that shouldn't be touched. You would just open the revisions folder and drop work in here. Right along with these other ones, that's fine. Anybody have any questions about this project we're finishing, revisions, any of that at all? No? So look, let's stretch out a little. I want to show you two elements of Illustrator. One is just day-to-day way to stay organized. It's kind of a close friend of layers called groups. I don't want to talk about making groups, group management. It's just a convenience. But then I want to show you something called the Pathfinders, which goes beyond convenience. I might have given you a peek because somebody had a special question for me in a prior week, but I want to give it a little bit of attention. The Pathfinders combine shape, and there's 6 or 7 ways it can do it, but we're only interested in 2. One is divide, where you use a shape to cut up another shape. You know, to use like a cookie cutter cuts out that shape out of the dough. The other one is, that's divide. The other one's called unite. We may make a snowman to try it out. And you know, with a snowman, you make your 3 big circles of snow. But if you unite them, you can share an outline, it could share a gradient, it becomes one shape. So it's another method of drawing. Now we have to do them together because Pathfinders make groups without asking you. So if you don't know how to work with groups, they get very disturbing. So we're going to get that out of the way. All right, could everyone open Illustrator with me? But today you could open any size document for a change. I'm not going to be too picky about it. So here I am in Illustrator. As you know, I haven't usually been clicking this create new. I'm going to do file menu new. They're both the same ultimately though. I got letter size currently set up and it's a vertical page. That's just fine. 8.5 inches by 11. I'm going to click create, or any size really. Okay, I want you to join me on a quick couple of exercises. Try to stay close to what we're doing together. Don't improvise just yet. I need something simple like this. Could you start by drawing a rectangle, maybe about this big, roughly? I'd like you to give it any fill color and a stroke if you feel like it. But then I'd like you to get the ellipse tool and I'd like you to overlap it with an ellipse, a circle or something similar, and just give that a different fill. So you might remember you have to keep looking at the fill box at the bottom of the toolbar, the fill and stroke box. If you want to change the fill, you always have to bring the fill box to the front. Let's add one more shape, and I'd like you to do something a little like this, a skinny one, sort of skinny, and yet another color. Now I'm going to need at least 2 of these sets for these demonstrations, but I think I'm going to make 4. So once you've got these 3 shapes piled up, something similar to mine, take your black arrow, select them all. So I'm going to press from outside, just touch them all so that I can make copies. If yours is too big, right, we're going to fit 4 on the page. So make it small enough. All right, once they're all selected and the right size, this is all with the black arrow, I'm going to hold down Option on my Mac or Alt on Windows, and I'm going to drag my copies. Don't let them overlap. Make sure they have enough room away from each other so you don't bump into the wrong set. So we got a stack, right? Each one is a stack of 3 objects. In total, though, there's 12 objects right now, and they're all on layer 1. But right now, we're not concerned with layers. I just want to mention we're currently just on 1 layer. I want to go over groups first, and then the Pathfinders. Now, why do you make a group at all? And I think some of you already figured it out, but here's the point. If you're drawing somebody right? So they got their 2 eyes, their nose, their ears, their mouth, maybe glasses, hair, mustache, whatever. It's so much drawing. And what if you need to move that head around, right? So it gets really ungainly. You know, with the black arrow, you could click one shape, hold down shift and click the others, but that's going to get pretty tedious. I mean, look at your computer keyboard. That's got to be what, like 30, 40 shapes? What if you needed to move a drawing of that? So it kind of makes sense with some shapes that once it's pretty close to done or at some reasonable state, you group it so it moves as a unit. So this is what I'd like you to do with me. A second here. I'd like you to select that first stack. Make sure it's all selected. So you have 2 ways. You can take the black arrow, drag from outside, make sure you touch each of them. They'll be selected. Or with the black arrow, you could click one, hold down shift on either Mac or Windows, and click the others. They're both just as good. Just be sure you get it all. Now that's not a group. That's a temporary selection. So every time you want to move it, you're going to have to go through the same steps. To make a group, the best way is Command G for group on Macs or Control G on Windows. But if you hate shortcuts, it's under the Object menu. Object menu, group. And here's the shortcut. And Adobe puts those shortcuts there so if you keep seeing it, you're like, you know what, this is a waste of time. I better just memorize the shortcut. So I'm going to actually just do it with the shortcut, Command G. Now, what happens then? With the black arrow, click off of that group. Go back and click it now and move it. So once it's a group, with one click, you could move it. What's interesting is, with one click, you could also scale it, you could rotate it, you could copy it, you could do any number of tricks, but they're all with one click because you grouped it. All right. Now, there's a little bit more to know about groups, but not a lot, right? Does everybody see the value of that? Did it work for you? Remember, to test it, you do have to click off the object, right? Come back, see if one click gets the whole thing. You're going to probably do a lot of grouping. The next project's rather complicated, I have to be honest, right? And moving stuff around is going to be a pain unless you have smart layers and smart groups on those layers. The question becomes, though, what if I want to change part of a group? And now that I've got the black arrow, how do I get at the parts? Now, there's 2 ways. They're both really good. I'd like you to know both. One you might have been doing by accident already, right? And I apologize. I'll own it, right? It's called isolation mode. So watch this. You know already that the black arrow will just get the whole group. But what happens if you double click on a group? So I want you to choose the part of the group you're going to click on. So I'm going to double click this greenish box. Double click it. Now what happens is everything else gets this milky white. You double clicked part of your group, right? And everything else is milky white because you can't touch it. In fact, you left the artwork. You're in what's called isolation mode, right? So here, you could use the black arrow the way you're used to. Make whatever kind of changes you want. You could scale, change colors, do whatever it is that you want to do. Now, what I want you to notice is in the top left, it actually says group, right? So it's reminding you, you're not in the document. You're not looking at the layers or anything. You're just in the group. And by the way, this would work with a single object too, to isolate it. But it's most interesting with groups. So if you click this little white arrow, do you see it up in the top left? It says group, then it says layer, and then there's an arrow on the left, right? I'll click that to get all the way back. And if that doesn't work, I'll click it again until I don't see any symbols up there. I'm back in the regular document. Now listen, guys, I know you guys are tired. I can see it all over you. Does isolation mode make sense? Right? So if you double click a lot, like you're one of those people who waits for the elevator like this, you're in trouble, right? You'll constantly be in isolation mode. It's lonely in isolation mode, right? So if you get there by accident, just be sure you know how to back out. So I'm going to show you a way you might like more. But I double click, I'm in it, I can see the symbols here. I could click back on the layer, or I could click this arrow, but just make sure you go all the way back. Left the group, left the layer, I'm back in the document completely. I'm not going to talk about isolation mode again. It's really that simple. You could use it. It is mighty handy. I really never got used to using it. I always find myself getting there by accident. Too much coffee, double clicking, right? I want to show you the other way though, right? Let's say you want to stay in the usual mode, right? You just want to work on a part. Well, the white arrow, right? The one that we use for anchor points and all that pen tool stuff, the white arrow is really called the direct selection tool. Why? Well, it directly selects parts of groups, anchors, which are part of objects. So let's see what the white arrow would do. So I'd like you to switch to the white arrow, right? That's the all-important white arrow. We've been using it a lot. Even though this is a group, the white arrow will let you select one shape. You could do whatever you want with it. But if you switch to the black arrow and click again, you still get the whole group. So here's the rule. In regular mode, forget about isolation. Black arrow selects the whole group no matter what. The white arrow selects a part no matter what. So the white arrow is definitely urgent. Any questions about groups? It's pretty obvious, right? So why do I bring it up today? You know, really, we actually tried groups day one. Do you remember the cities we made? You know, we put all these windows on a building, we grouped it, and I said, well, we're not coming back to this for a while. So you saw the power of it. You know, I mean, trying to move those buildings around would have been a nightmare. They had like 20 windows on them. They kind of had to be grouped, right? Well, I bring it up today because some advanced features group your objects even when you don't ask. So if you never heard of a group, you'd be kind of lost. Like, how come I can't work on these parts anymore? So I want to go over a set of advanced features, as I mentioned. They're called the Pathfinders, and you'll see how it relates to groups. Can everyone join me by going to the window menu? Window menu, Pathfinder. Window menu, Pathfinder. This feature's been around for a really long time. And I want to be fair about it. Can you use Illustrator without it? Yeah. Do you want to? Probably not. Because there's all kinds of things that are easier to draw with the Pathfinders. Now I want to make my point. This first Pathfinder is called Unite. The one beneath it is called Divide. These are the only two we care about today. And in fact, all these others, so it looks like there's another 8, are not really that important. If you're ever interested in exploring them, you can, but I'd like you to get to know the first in each row. So I want you not to use the group you made. In fact, let's just drag it off stage so you don't get tempted. First step, choose one of these stacks you made that are not grouped, right? I'm proving it. But I want you to select the whole stack. Now, I want you to go to the very first Pathfinder. It's right under the word shape. This one's called Unite, and click it. Well, that's pretty clear what that did. Did it work for you? There's so many things that are easier to make this way. Like really, if I had to design a shape like this, the only other way that I could think of would be the pen tool. But who wants to do that? You know, really, if I could overlap 3 shapes and just unite them. So really, I knew this guy. I directed a small art school for a while, and I hired this guy who was a logo king. You know, he wasn't Paul Rand, but he was a logo king. And he was like, oh man, I'm going to teach the Pathfinders today. And at that time, I said, you know, I never use it really. He said, well, drop by my class. I could not believe how fast this guy was with having the class just mention products. Like, oh, ice cream company. You know, within minutes, he'd make this ice cream cone with stacks of ice cream. And it was all built on a lot of Pathfinders. Right? We're going to try some experiments together. All right. That was Unite. I want to compare it to my other favorite, though. So could you select another untouched stack? Select the whole part. The one underneath Unite does the absolute opposite. It's called divide. Click divide. Now, once you've clicked divide, there's two things that I want to point out. Divide makes groups, all right? So that stack now, if you use the black arrow, it's going to move as a unit, right? So the only way to really enjoy divide is going to either go to isolation mode or switch to the white arrow. I'm going to use the white arrow to make my points, so you might want to join me. Deselect it by clicking off and go get the white arrow. Everywhere your shapes overlapped are now unique shapes. You could delete any you want. You could select any you want to change their fill color or their stroke. And it creates the opportunity to do very complex objects. I want to remind you, the white arrow does let you move anchors just like it did in the past. You know, so that's always available to you. But the thing that's interesting is once you divided a shape, they are truly divided. So there's any number of things that you can do with divide. And this was all just this earlier. Did divide work? So, you know, unite's a little easier because, you know, it's not really a group. It's just like one new object. You know, a divide makes a bunch of little objects, but they're a group. Even now that they're not touching, if I switch to the black arrow and I click one of these, I'm getting the whole thing. It's pretty handy if I need copies or to change size or to rotate. But if I do want to work on any of the parts, I do have to switch to the white arrow or double click with the black arrow. I'm in isolation mode and I could do black arrow kind of things. One here. I have to go back. Any questions yet? So look,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
You want to repeat the last one?
Yeah.
No problem at all. So I'm hoping everybody has a pile available. And if you're running out, you might want to copy it just in case. I'm going to leave a spare. Let me get rid of this one, making some room. So make sure it's not a group, right? Because it's not a group yet. It's just a regular stack. Make sure to select the whole stack and nothing else. Now, we already know that unite would make it one shape that looks like that, right? But that's not what I want. I want to use divide. So when I click divide, everywhere the shapes overlapped, right? Like this one overlapped all the other two shapes. Every overlap's become a unique shape. The only way to use them is with the white arrow. I want to say something super clearly why. To use the white arrow, you have to deselect the shape, then use the white arrow. So I'm going to deselect by clicking out here. Then with the white arrow, I'm going to pick the part I want. And you could delete, or you can change colors. Anything you could think of. I'm taking the fills out of these two. Levi, did that help? Great. Anybody else have any questions about this? I want to make something together. Maybe two things if we have time. Robin, do I sense a question? No?
No, I was just moving my hand. I was just...
All right. All right, let's make something. I want to start with something simple. So there's an ice cream company, right? And they're calling themselves Snowman, which is very 20th century. I think it should be Snow Person. But anyway, they're calling themselves Snowman, right? And we're going to make a classic kind of snowman, which they're going to use as a logo. So let's see what we can do, right? I don't think we need any of this stuff. So could everyone do select all and delete? So that's Command A on a Mac or Control A on Windows. Let's leave the Pathfinder out. We're going to need it. I'd like you to find your ellipse tool. So it may be on top of that little pile, that little stack of tools where the rectangle tool lives, but it may be hiding under the rectangle. So what I'm looking for are 3 ovals, each one a little larger than the last. Let's go ahead and give them a fill. Any fill that you feel like. I know it's a snowman, you don't see orange snowmen, but it's just easy to see in Zoom. And once you have them, let's overlap them just like you were actually making a snowman. Now, I want to point out that it doesn't matter which one's on top. You know, so the command right bracket trick doesn't really matter. You're going to join these anyway. All that does matter is that you like the way they look stacked, because soon it's going to be a big silhouette, you know, 1 shape, not 3. So you want to make sure that you like the overall look. All right, I want to unite these so we could talk quickly about what possibilities that would create. So I'd like you to take all 3. Remember, they do have to overlap. And go to unite. That was the first button we tried, the one on top. Now that's pretty interesting for all kinds of reasons, right? I just want to make sure it worked. Did it work? Right. So look, I love the pen tool. I'm Mr. Pen Tool. But man, that would have been rough to draw that. Really, it would have been. And slow. You know, there's really no purpose in it if I could build it from geometric shapes. I want you to take a look at something with me. Could everyone go to the window menu? I want to briefly open up the stroke palette. It's something we're going to be talking more about down the road. Window menu, stroke. Remember, this is alphabetical order. So window menu, go down to the S's and choose stroke. Mine's not open all the way, so I'm going to click right next to the name stroke. There's this tiny double arrow there, which folds it. I'm going to make the stroke really big. Well, right off the bat, you could see one value of having united it. If you tried this before you united it, you would get very thick strokes in all 3 circles. It's clearly not going to work for a logo, and it's not going to work for many, many kinds of artwork, right? So that's one cool reason. I want to throw in a little aside, since you have the stroke palette out. Just make sure that it's not folded up, right? So hang on a second there. Let me get this out here. When I say fold it up, I mean like that. Every time you double click it, it folds up. This is the whole one. If you have it open all the way, you could even try profile at the bottom. This is what it looks like. I'm mixing subjects and I'm going a little bit too far, right? I just want to say something. To more than one of you, I said, gee, if you're going to use a lot of strokes, you're going to have to learn more about how to make them count. Here's one way to make them count. You choose what's called a width profile from the stroke palette so that they're not super even, ultra computery looking. It looks more like a calligrapher's line. But I couldn't have done any of this if I hadn't united the shape. So again, I clicked here. If you want to change the stroke weight, a good place to do it is from the stroke palette. If you want to change the look of it, just make sure the palette's open all the way so the profile shows up at the bottom. And there's other profiles to try. I want to try one more thing at least with this. What if somebody wanted to take, the ice cream company said, oh, we love the snowman. We just want a bite taken out of him. You know, with this idea of eating the ice cream, and here it's going to be a snowman with a bite taken out of it. So I'd have to draw something like a cookie cutter that feels like teeth marks, you know, and that's not particularly easy to do, but I think what I'm going to do today is just use the pencil tool for it. So let's find the pencil tool. I'm on my toolbar here, and this shape tool, this thing comes to the top often. It's the pencil tool that you want. It should let you just tap N to find that tool. I'm going to draw a shape to use for divide, take the bite out. I do want to double check though the pencil quickly. I'm going to look at my pencil tool options for a minute. I'm going to double click the pencil tool itself. I'm on the toolbar, I'm going to double click it. This is, guys, can I ask you a quick question because I honestly don't remember. Have I shown you the pencil tool options before?
Yeah, you showed us how to smooth it.
Yeah, so some people are saying no, some people are saying yes. It's because I did it briefly, right? And that's what I thought. And I'm not going to go over it in any detail now. I'm going to say this much though. If you double click the tool, yes, you could choose how smooth it is. I like it at 3/4 smooth. This way isn't going to give me any help smoothing it out. So I'm going to go 3/4 of the way. So please watch this. Nearby, I'm kind of imagining teeth marks. Now the back of it doesn't matter much, so I'm just going to close it up. That stroke is confusing me a bit. So I have to use my stroke palette here and change the profile back to uniform.
Wait, how'd you get the pencil options again?
You go to the toolbar and double click right on the pencil tool.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome. So I drew this shape. I had smoothing on, so it helped, made it smooth. It looks kind of pen tool looking. I didn't like the stroke that I seem to have inherited, so I came back to the stroke palette and changed it. So it didn't look like that. I changed it to uniform. Now I could fill it with a color, even though that's not particularly urgent. I want to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to move it to wherever I think the bite should be. I'm going to get that just right. I'm trying to imagine this being a removed shape. This is going to just be used for the sake of divide. So what I've got now is a snowman I made by uniting. I made this cutter shape for the teeth marks, and I'm ready to use divide. So just like before, I have to select the pile of shapes. So I'm making sure I get these both. And then I go to the divide button. Now, all I did that for is because I'm going to get the white arrow and delete the parts I no longer want. I'll do this twice. So I'm going to get my white arrow. I don't need this one. Don't need this one. And there it is. I don't know if that's easy, but in case it isn't, I'm going to do it one more time, right? Remember, this will be on YouTube later. Today's a little tough for me because I'm going to be on the road. It may not be on YouTube right away, but I'm going to try. So I'm going to back up. I chose to draw a shape with the pencil tool. I wanted a little help smoothing it, so I double-clicked the tool and made sure it was on the smooth side. This is a bit far, so I went 3/4 over. I'm drawing something that feels like it could be teeth, but I'm closing that shape up because I can't use it to divide otherwise. If I have a strange stroke on it, I might choose to change it back to uniform from the stroke palette. That's not the critical part though. I'm going to move this shape over where I want the bite taken. I'm going to choose the size. I might change the rotation. But when I like it, I'm going to stop. All right, so to use divide, you always select more than one overlapping shape. So here's two shapes, and I select them both. I click divide. So now I actually have three shapes. I got a big orange shape, a little yellow one, and another yellow one. I could go to isolation mode to get at them, or just use the white arrow. And there it is. Okay, you know, I have another exercise I'd like to do, but I think I'd rather spend some time talking about the next project, right? I think next week I'm probably going to do more Pathfinder with you. I want to make something complicated, more complicated. But the idea is we're using Unite, that's the black Pathfinder on the top there, to build shapes out of multiple shapes, to add, right? I overlap them and I just unite them. And that's how we made the snowman. I'm using divide mostly to take away shapes or to break them into small units. So I'm not saying I'd want to do this, but I could do any number of tricks. You know, for a logo, for example, but for anything, just for drawing. Maybe next week we'll do what's called the lamp exercise. We'll make a lamp this way. But I'm not going to go over this. I just want to make a point.
Wait, how did you copy and paste that so perfectly?
I shouldn't have done that, right? I just asked for trouble. I'll show you real quickly. You did this actually once a very long time ago with me. I made a complicated shape. But let me just move this out of the way with the black arrow because it is a group. I want to show you. If you make a shape and copy it by option dragging it, Command D will repeat what you did. So in other words, it'll make another copy on the same angle at the same distance. Command D or Control D. So does that answer that question?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we actually did that when we made Windows on the City, but that was way back in class 1. All right, I want to drop this for a minute. About, unite, and divide. You know, see what you can do with it. Keep it in mind. Some of you really are not going to find a lot of use of it right away. You know, the kind of drawing that you're intending on doing might not need it as much, but it might. You know, I'm often very pleased to have it. We'll come back to it and make something much more complex in the near future. I want to spend this time, though, introducing you to the third project. So there are 4, as you know, you succeeded at 2, and we're going to start the third one. Now listen, folks, I hope you can tell that I'm very much on your side, because what I'm about to show you intimidates almost every class that I teach. And then in a couple of weeks, you're like, wow, I just did not know that I can do that. Right now, it might look like a bit much. So just have faith. The people before you felt the same way. I want to show you something. I am recording, aren't I?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get to today's handout, and I'm going right to the homework box. But before we do anything, let's just look at it. I'm calling the project 4 Views. And here are some samples. So the first thing I want to say to you is this is a toy. And what you're going to be doing this week is you're going to find an object to use for this very realistic illustration assignment. So this is a toy. You can see it has a little switch on the side. This is not a photograph. This is all drawn in Illustrator. And there are 4 views of it, right? So we've got side view, a front view, a top view, and a 3/4 view. Side view, front view, top view, and 3/4 view. This is also happens to be a toy. The assignment is not about toys. It's just a coincidence. This person had a little VW, little Volkswagen Beetle. And again, we see front view, side view, top view, and 3/4 view. It's interesting that this artist and the last one chose the 3/4 view to be a bit in the air, right? And that's probably because it's a toy, you know, but I think it worked well. So this was the artist's fancy high-heeled shoes. And it's kind of remarkable how leather-like these shoes came out. I asked them to change the color of the background to kind of echo the leather quality. And I think it works really, really well. Again, so we got a top view, front view, side view, and a 3/4 view. It's interesting, this artist did 3/4 from the back. They probably wanted to show off the heel. And we're going to look a little bit further. This week, all you're going to do is try to find an appropriate object and photograph it in the 4 views. You have to have that by next week. And frankly, it's not a lot of work. It's a lot of thinking. So you walk around the house and kind of figure out what you want to use. Now, before we go further, let's look further. This, believe it or not, is a USB keychain drive. I wish she showed it with the piece out that you poke into the computer. It looked like a ship. And at first I was like, what is this ship exactly? And then she just took it out of her pocket and showed me. It was her keychain drive for the classroom. Top view, front view, side view, 3/4 view. And this person chose a gradient background. There's a lot of gradients on the actual object too. This one I think is really interesting. Any of you who've played Monopoly probably remember this piece.
Oh, my favorite game.
You know, I like it for the first hour. You know, really. I hope we play Turbo Monopoly, where we start with 3 times the amount of money, try to speed the game up. So
I don't think I've ever finished a game of Monopoly.
I know. I think part of the fun is like getting silly and just sort of like, oh, to hell with your hotel. Anyway.
There's the one with the credit cards now. Have you played that one?
No, I haven't. We haven't.
It's kind of cool, actually.
Really?
Yeah, like everyone gets a little fake credit card and there's a little machine that loads it.
Oh, man. Funny. In the future, it'll be a thumbprint, All right, I'll pay for the night. Anyway, the race car is an old one. It's been around for a long time, and it's metallic on a at least on a vintage set. It's actually made of metal, and this artist went out of the way to make it feel kind of metal. Side view, back view, right, instead of front view, which is kind of interesting. Top and 3/4. The artist asked me if they could do this because the page itself was not singing, and they were like, "Look, can I just bring in?" I don't know if they drew this part in Illustrator or if I just let them bring it in. I honestly don't remember. But it was just an additional element that showed even more professionalism. They answered the assignment, but they wanted the page to sing. And you've heard me say that on both of our projects so far, that the page has to sing. So I want to say something about this really impressive fire extinguisher. I'd asked the class not to do cylinders, right? Because part of it is learning different angles of an object, right? And this artist said, well, can I just show you what I'm thinking? Because I think you're going to like it. It's not just like a bottle turned. It's like, it looks the same. Turn a glass of water around, They're like, no, it's more complicated. So I let them do it. And I'm so glad that I did. It's beautiful. We would have to argue about which view is which, but there's a clear side in front, let's call it, right? As well as a top view and a 3/4 view. The gleam, the light, the gradient, the details. By the way, this artist was upset. They didn't want to hand it in. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And they're like, well, I didn't do the label. I was like, wow, this person wanted to do all the text on there too. He took another class with me and was the same in the other class, just a high achieving individual. Again, if you're in shock now, because this, I hope you're impressed. Are you impressed?
Yeah.
All right, good. I hope so. I'm assuming the quiet ones are like, well, I'm not that impressed. And that's okay. You don't have to agree with me. The thing is, what we're going to do is, well, one, we're going to learn a little bit about using place. Right? Do you remember place? We used it for the seashell to bring in. We might have done a little with a figure drawing. We're going to use it this time for your photographs. Right? And using the photograph and the pen tool, we're going to break down this real object that was a photograph into clean, clear shapes in Illustrator. And then you're going to see how much magic happens when you start applying color and gradients. I want to add something coming up. It's called gradient mesh, which is the complex cousin of gradients. And it lets you add more colors and in different orders. And it's not just linear or radial. So there are actually 3 kinds of gradient at this stage. We're going to learn at least one more. So a lot of these blends you see, like on the leather shoes, for example, you really couldn't pull off with the gradient. These you could with the gradient tool. They're pretty simple. But these gradients are really complicated. It looks like the sole's just slightly worn in spots, and it's just a complex gradient. It's a little bit of a challenge, but not as hard as you think. It's something coming up. We are going to look at the handout together, but I do want to ask you, does anyone have a question already?
Is there any limit on what kind of like object you can do?
You know, there is, but they're hard to describe. All I want is an object that's going to stay interesting. So I don't want anything too simple, really. But some art, I had a student who just loved the printer in our lab. And I said to him, look, this has got to be the most boring object I've ever seen. He goes, well, give me a chance. It's interesting that to him, he just loved function and you know, how a mechanical object shows its function by the way it's made. And it just came off. It was an easy A. So what I would ask you to avoid, though, is don't do action figures. I don't want Ken or Barbie. I have nothing against Ken, Barbie, their condominium, or their sports car. It's just like figures are not going to help you learn about angles the way that I want or about the pen tool. I'm on a mission. You're going to have so much skill after this project that the world just opens, you know, for you. So if you have any doubts, again, I'm going to be away for a bit, so it might be hard for me to get to my email, but I'll try if you want to suggest things. No fuzzy objects. You don't want, you know, clean, clear, sharp-edged objects will do best. Objects that have clear angles, cars, furniture. You know, my house is a little messy right now, but whatever. You know, my cat would not be good, but the chair might. I'd take that blanket off. The couch might. The bookcases on the right angles, they might be a little boring. I don't know. There's a basket-like trunk back there. That might be fun to try to do the basket. Nice chairs, maybe things with holes in them, you know, like a chair that has an open, partially open back, you know, things that offer some visual complexity to play with. Let's get a look at the handout. This is all in the homework box. You're going to learn a lot about using photographs, pen tool, blended colors, and texture, right? This is currently class 7, and the project's not due till week 11. It's 4 weeks because it's large. You know, 4 weeks will do it as long as you make sure to do each week's installment. You're going to create a tightly rendered set of 4 drawings of the selected object, right? Your selected object. The set's going to use orthographic and isometric elements. I'm going to describe that in more detail next week. For now, though, you want to understand the angles. We're going to go over that in a minute. Your first 3 drawings will represent the front. So be really clear, you can't make this up. It has to be the front. If the back is more interesting, I'll accept it. But again, it's not on an angle. The top, again, it's not on an angle. You know, arguably, you could make a slight angle if it interests you. We could look again at these. Hang on a second. So this is the top view, right? But it's not, you know, this is the top view. This is flat out top view, so that's pretty clear. Let's see about the Volkswagen. Here's another clean top view. So really is what I'm looking for. The front, the side, and the top view are not on an angle, right? They're very straightforward. All right, but the fourth view will show a custom angle, right? Now, it says here that includes 3 visible planes. So what I'm trying to say, just give me a second, I want to grab something. We only have a few minutes left, but we have enough time. This is front view of my tissue box. This would be very boring to not do a cube, right? But it's front view, side view, top view. This is an angle where I could see 3 planes, front, side, and top, right? So that last view should be on an angle. So this is what I'd suggest. Today, tomorrow, over the weekend, look around the house. Look for objects that interest you. And then ask yourself, does it have interesting angles? You know, is it too consistent? Is it too round? Or does it have interesting angles, right? And photograph it. So you might have to get low down to photograph the object. You might have to get above it to photograph the object, you know. You may want to light it a certain way. You know, if your room is dark, when you bring it into Illustrator, you won't be able to see the details. So you want to make sure that it's lit well. You know, honestly, I prefer things lit on one side because it just makes the clearest lines of the details of an object rather than something that's overly lit. But frankly, as long as it's lit, I think you'll be okay. All right, let's go back to the handout for a second here. Make sure I don't forget anything important. So you choose your object and make sure it has enough detail, right? I'm going to ask you to avoid cylindrical objects unless you've got a good reason, you know, like the guy who did the fire extinguisher. I don't want you to do figures, so I really don't want to see any Batman or Darth Vader. I love Batman, and I'm okay with Darth Vader. It's just not good for this project. See the samples on our website. So again, remember, here's the samples up in red. You could choose things of your own. Those were original choices, but they're just examples of things that worked. Some are more complex, some are more simple, but they all got A's. A chair, if the chair is interesting, a couch, a dresser. Maybe the dresser is more interesting with one drawer open. That would be more fun. Or other suitable furniture. A toy of sufficient complexity, one with angles. That's why I don't want dolls or action figures. Vehicles, cars, helicopters. The big problem with cars and helicopters is getting the photographs. Chances of finding the 4 angles you need on Google is very slim. So a lot of people who want that found toys so they could photograph it the way they want. I don't know, maybe you have a drone. Machines. My wife has a sewing machine that's kind of beautiful, it'll be perfect. Cranes. Just about anything that has the right kind of complexity. So it asks you to light it to help, get the photographs of the 4 views. We're going to eventually place them, file menu place in Illustrator. And I may use them next class. So you're not going to submit them, but you're going to need to have them. So make sure you bring them with you or you have them available on your computer. Any questions for me about project 3, 4 views? No. So look, if you're unsure, do a couple sets of photos, you know, for each of a few different objects. And then when you look them over, I think you'll see, oh yeah, I really want to do this one. You know, we've got a month to pull it off. It'll be 3 weeks by next time I see you. And so there's going to probably be 2 rounds of drafts after we talk more about how you're going to use the photos before the actual final that's due week 11. Really, no questions at all?
Should we save it as one PDF in case you ask us to show it? Like all 4 pictures in one file?
You know, I don't think you have to, because if I ask you to show it, you're going to screen share. So you can show it to me any way you want.
Got it.
You know, so guys, think about things that'll make it more convenient for you. You know, that the photo's not cluttered with other things. If you're exhausted, that it's not just covered in endless detail. You know, for example, if something's plaid, you know, it's got a plaid pattern on it with strong light, you're going to need to shade the plaid, which can be done, you know, but it might be complicated. I don't know. You know, we'll have to find out. There's surprises every semester since I've been doing this, and they're consistently beautiful. I've had people who were so sure they couldn't do it. They were like, forget it. I'm just gonna take the F. And I'm like, no, you're not. And then they'll show me stuff at the end that's just sort of beautiful. So if there's no questions about this, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. Should I, you know, I'm trying to avoid calling names. I do that sometimes just so people are more likely to, you know, feel comfortable talking. But I know other people are horrified when I call them. So I'm trying not to do that. All right, no questions at all. All right, so it goes. Let me wrap it up then. 1, I really liked Project 2. Really. I have to say Project 1 was also strangely professional looking in for most of the work for people who just got started on the program. And it had to make people nervous. I mean, really, just to draw a face, like, you know, when do you draw the eye? You know, and you know, what about if it's behind, if I drew it first and now I hit it with the head? But now you know layers and you know groups and you know a little bit of pen tool and pencil tool, even how to smooth the pencil tool. All these doors are opening, gradients. You know, we're further along than it might seem. This project here is less stylistically open you know, because these were pretty realistic. You know, style's evident anyway. I could mention all the most famous realists, and if we look at their work, the work still looks different, real or not. We'll see. All right, folks, I'm going to let everybody go. It's noon. Remember, there's a revisions folder for those of you choosing to do a revision. Some of you, I made suggestions that were like you could or you couldn't. Very few did I say I really want a revision. But if I did say that, I think it's in your best interest. All right, I'm going to let you go. Guys, it's been fun. I'll see you all next Thursday. All right? Good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
You're going, Professor.
Bye. My pleasure.
I wanted to say thank you
Yeah.
for emailing me about my project one revision. I appreciate like getting feedback. I feel like online it's like weird, so.
I know. So Adi, you probably blew me away if I actually bothered to write you.
Oh, thank you.
I had to grade, it was like 150 projects. So it was long
Oh
and
my
grueling.
gosh.
And so now and then I was like, oh my God, I gotta say something to this person. So thanks for letting me know.
Thank
It's
you.
appreciated. It helps me make that time when I realize people
Yeah.
care. All right, you're doing great, by the way.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. And goodbye to all of you on YouTube.